Today, I'm super excited to have one of my best friends in the world, Cooper Schwartz, here today. Thanks, Coop, for joining us. Cooper is one of the people who was fundamental in me getting inspired to travel. He's been all over the world to more places than most people that I know. He's spontaneous, he's clever when he needs to be, although that might not show on camera. He's generally a really good guy. Perhaps more importantly than that, though, is he's got a really unique and interesting take on travel. He owns a company called His and Hers Romantic Vacations. I've hired him, paid my own money to do this. He's also a licensed counselor. How do you say this? What's the job title there?
I am a licensed mental health counselor.
Nailed it. He's a licensed mental health couples counselor. I think I got that. Which means that he actually knows what he's talking about when he's dealing with counseling with couples, and he's a big traveler himself, so he has this really, really interesting niche right in the middle of that where he can help plan relationships that'll actually make you as a couple stronger, at least in theory, as opposed to what travel can do a lot of time, which is break things down. So, Coop, I'm super excited that you're here. Let's start talking travel.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Coop, I know you really well, but tell me a little bit more about your day-to-day. Where do you work? What are you doing? Who are you?
That's a good question.
That's a tough one.
Well, I run, I do a lot of online marketing to kind of afford the lifestyle that I have. But my passion hobby, as I like to call it, are two things. One, I have a travel agency called hisandhersvacations.com. I found very early on that I had an interest in romance and in kind of what made couples work and didn't work. You know, for full disclosure, my mom is a relationship expert, and she's a very prominent person in the relationship world, and so I grew up kind of under that umbrella of always kind of wondering and caring about how to make relationships work.
We've had a couple times where we'll be driving down the road and we'll hear his mom on NPR, or we'll hear a promotion for one of her books or something. So yeah. She's a pretty special woman.
It's awesome, and my mom, Dr. Pepper Schwartz, is basically impacted me in a way that I always wanted to do something with that, and I didn't know exactly how I'd do it. And I wanted to take travel, and I wanted to take this whole relationship side and meld them together. And so what I ended up doing while I was finding myself bartending was I decided to go and become a certified counselor. So I went and got my master's in counseling psychology, and simultaneously I started a travel agency. And so as I began to build these two different expertise, I decided, well, I can combine them and make a travel website for romance and for enhancing intimacy. And so in my spare time, when I'm not doing my online marketing stuff, I'm going out there and researching the most romantic places, destinations, and types of situations couples could get themselves into.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. So we know now through a lot of research that any kind of spontaneity or novelty in a relationship can be really good for it. And so we look for situations that are safe, obviously, but that are new for the couples. So whenever I'm working with a new couple, I'll interview them to find out kind of what their comfort levels are and what their interests are, and always suggest something new for them to do together. Of course, it has to be within their comfort zone, but I've found that the couples who enjoy and grow the most on their trips are the ones who are willing to try new things together. And an example of that might be, you know, going to, if you can, going to Africa and going on a safari, or going to a desert and riding a camel.
But Cooper, aren't all these things dangerous?
Yeah, I think in life there's a bit of danger in everything that we do, and I think that risk is measurable, and you know how risky something is. That's why people actually, you know, pay me sometimes to evaluate the riskiness of a trip and provide them with a good solution, which is a travel agency that or a travel provider that they can trust. So for me, it's about helping people figure out what's most important to them, and it's not always easy because couples don't necessarily get one another on a travel sense.
Yeah,
a lot of us...
It's a different kind of traveling.
Totally. And we're scared sometimes to travel with the one we love because we know it doesn't always work out so good.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is risk in anything, and that even with risk, there are huge rewards. And if you take a small risk, you find that on the other side there is actually learning and growth, and maybe even discovering that you like that thing you were scared of before. I know, for example, that you have done countless risky businesses on your travels.
Never happened.
And you seem to grow immensely from it. So I take that same kind of knowledge and apply it in my businesses. So that's what I do. I work with couples on the side as well. I do counseling with them. And I don't often, mix the two. I don't say, hey, you guys should really go on a vacation.
That seems like it'd be a big problem.
Yeah, it's a good upsell, but I feel like there's a conflict of interest there.
It seems illegal.
Yeah, it is probably.
Oh, yeah. Good. Okay, so let's start from the beginning here. Coop, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, just in Seattle proper. When I was 1 year old, my parents, who had always wanted to have a farm, bought a farm on Vashon Island. And so until I was 10 years old, I spent my time between a city life in Seattle and on the weekends, a farmer's kid. And so I would go up, and my parents really wanted to have me kind of entertained and entertain myself, and they gave me kind of free roam of their property. And so they allowed me to raise rabbits and ride horses and jump on llamas.
Wait, why were you jumping on llamas?
Well, it turns out that if you want to actually give a llama medicine, you have to corral them. And if you don't train your llama, the only way to actually get the llama is to tackle it. And so you just wrap yourself around its neck, and then you just hold on for dear life till it gets tired enough to stop going anywhere.
Yeah, I had no idea that you had an expertise in wrestling llamas.
Yeah,
that explains more than I knew.
I hung up my hat. So I grew up doing that till I was 10, and then when I was 10 years old, my parents decided that they wanted to combine those two, the city and the farm.
Okay.
And so they bought a ranch about an hour east of Seattle, and so we ended up having a horse ranch where I would again kind of live the rancher half lifestyle, and then I would commute into the city to go to school and to have my social life.
How far away are we talking between the two places?
About 45 minutes.
Okay.
So it was nice enough where I could dabble, but it was far enough out where I really felt like I was in a whole other world.
Yeah, that's nice. That's a cool aspect of the Pacific Northwest is you don't have to travel too far and you can completely get out of where you were before.
Totally. And anyone who's from this area knows that all you have to do is go over the mountains and you hit farm country pretty quick. And if you want to see the city life and feel the city life, you kind of can still dabble.
Yeah. For those wondering, we're filming in Seattle right now, so that we're close to home.
Yeah.
In fact, we're at home. This is where I live. Let's get right into the heavy stuff. This is a question I get all of the time. How do you make time for travel?
I think that's one of the hardest things to do.
You're a busy guy. You have 2 full-time jobs that I know of, plus everything else you got on the side.
My trick and my hack for creating time is you have to set that time aside way in advance, or something else will come up for any number of reasons. So for me, I make time by picking dates that are very far out in the future and planning to stick to that. So I will go ahead and mark off.
Are we talking like 5 years in the future? Are we talking like 3 months in the future?
That's a good question. It has to be a reasonable amount of time so that you can even predict what you might be doing. I typically will do it about anywhere from 6 months to a year out. And I typically will travel when I know that things are going to be slower at home, business-wise. So over those holidays, if it's Christmas or if it's Thanksgiving, sometimes that sucks because you might want to spend that time with your family. But it tends to be, if you have a busy life, those are the times where business is going to be slower. You can go out and get without losing some efficiency there. I also love traveling in the summer. I think it's for me. It's about when I know that I have the most time to give. I will set aside in the future. I don't think it's easy for everyone. I think it's also about how much money you have, of course, and that's a whole other question. But
well, let's dive into that a little bit. I mean, how do you afford travel? The time and the money, and then the fear, which is kind of the root of both those things, are the things that I think are the hardest part about travel. So how do you make money for it? How do you set aside when you have all these other bills to pay.
Totally. There's a couple ways to do it that I found. One is that don't travel beyond your means.
Sure.
You know, if you can only afford to go backpacking in Southeast Asia, well then, you know, plan the darndest best backpacking trip that you can around Southeast Asia. If you can afford to go bigger, you know, you wanna go and trek around you know, Europe and stay at 4 or 5-star hotels, and then, you know, budget that out. Look at all those hotels beforehand, look at the activities that you want to do, and kind of give yourself an estimate of what that trip's going to cost you. I always try to save money throughout the year in a separate account, in a savings account for my travel. And I think it's important to commit to putting a certain amount of money aside that you're going to use while you're traveling. And so in your research, in figuring out what you want to do, get a budget, develop a budget around what you're looking for, how much money you think you're going to spend, and then set a goal that you need to reach, how much money you need to deposit each month or each couple months.
So it sounds like working backwards so that we can decide if you need
Absolutely.
to save $1, if you need to save $50 every day.
Absolutely. And, you know, if you're a very resourceful person, there are a lot of people who want to help you travel. You know, I find that if you know people in other places, to, you know, use those resources, call them, see if they'll put you up for a few days, see if they have friends in those places or places that you want to go that have room for you to stay. There are things like couchsurfer.com. There are a lot of hacks, things that you talk about in some of your work that I think is immensely helpful when you're trying to save money. It's, you know, you kind of have to be, you can't be a little stuck up when you're traveling, because sometimes you just got to be thankful for the opportunity to be able to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important wherever you go. Again, there's vacationing and then there's and traveling. I think traveling is when you take yourself and you're willing to just commit to whatever that place looks like. It's not about you throwing money at it,
right,
to make it more what you want.
It's about you experiencing it.
Yep.
So one of my favorite, most personal questions that I have here, packing routine. It seems like everybody does this differently. How do you pack, and what is your routine for doing so?
So first, I always do my research on the place that I'm going. I kind of look to see what the weather's going to be like, what I can expect in terms of temperature and things like that. And I will then choose a travel bag that will suit my traveling. So if it's going to be a backpack experience, if it's going to be more of a vacation-like experience, you know, do I need to be able to check this bag or take it on with me on the plane? So I will choose that size bag, and then I will begin to find the tools, my clothing and other things that I need to bring with me that will fit inside that bag. I will generally start with way less than I need because over the years I've found that you really don't need that much stuff. That is probably the number one thing that people, I should say mistake that people make, is they just bring too much stuff with them when they travel.
Yeah.
We realize as we go on that there are certain shirts we like the best, and pants that we like the best, and shoes that just are the most comfortable. And so any kind of relief you can provide yourself, even when it comes to just making a quick decision on the road, it really just makes it easier. So for me, I will choose, my core pants, my core shirts, my one jacket, the things that I need, and then I will go into looking at what kinds of accessory items I have. So I generally will pull out all of my stuff that I have that I normally travel with, and I will lay it out on the floor. I will get kind of a good map of what are the things that I'm taking with me on my trip. That will be anything from my laptop to a phone to credit cards to a passport, a book that I'm planning to finish on the trip, anything that I really need to make part of my travel survival pack. Sometimes that's a pocket knife, things like that. So I will then put those things in my bag, and I will test it out, see if it's the right weight. If it isn't, something's got to go, or maybe I got to use a lighter jacket, something like that. Generally, as a rule, I don't take anything with me clothing-wise that I'm not willing to lose.
Oh, that's a good rule.
It's just one of those things when you're traveling that if you can't live without it, don't bring it traveling with you, because stuff happens, as we've talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to also, know that when you're taking stuff with you on the trip, that there are certain things that you can buy along the way, know, and
for sure.
and it's not, take the things that you know that you need, but also make sure that that when you go, that there are items that maybe you could purchase if you needed to, and that you could possibly leave behind, like a second pair of shoes.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it turns out they sell flip-flops on most major beaches in the world.
Clever.
Yeah. Now, we all make a ton of mistakes when traveling, myself especially, and frankly, it takes a long time to learn certain things with regard to this. What are some of the things that have taken you the longest to learn as a traveler?
Well, quite a few things, because you're never, if you think you've kind of figured it out and aced travel, then you are way off base. It's taken me a long time to learn that shit happens, and that no matter what you plan, something isn't going to go right. You're going to miss the train. You're going to snap a
shoelace.
Something that is just not in the cards for you that day. And that you have to kind of just roll with the punches. If you lose sight, or you lose control, or you get overwhelmed, things can get dangerous sometimes, or you might even hurt yourself. So I think for me, it's taken a while to really realize that I expect something not to go my way. And therefore, when that happens, I kind of can let it roll off me, and I can then go on and make lemonade out of lemons, as they say. It seems to work. Let's see. The other thing that I would say has taken me a long time to learn is that as much planning as you can do in the forefront of your vacation, the more you can enjoy yourself on your vacation. And so not being. I made a mistake my first trip to Europe, of thinking that I wouldn't have to book any of my accommodations.
I've made this mistake too.
Right, and you know how it goes. You get there, and all of a sudden, you find yourself at 10 o'clock at night with your backpack on at the train station going, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit.
Yeah.
And so what I found is if I can solve some of those major issues, like where am I gonna sleep, or how am I gonna get from X place to Y, my stress level is so much lower when I'm traveling. I'm able to get a lot of those variables under control. And I think the more I've done that over the years, the more organized I become in my travel. You can always opt out of those things once you've planned them, but have them planned beforehand.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you're traveling, all kinds of things come up. So I like to call these travel detours instead of mistakes, even though that's exactly what they are. Tell me a couple times in your travels where you had what might be considered travel mistakes.
Lots, travel is almost synonymous with things not working out.
Yeah,
I mean, if you try and plan for it, you certainly will run into the ground at some point. And one that comes to mind was when I was doing an abroad experience in Australia. We were on our spring break and had decided to take a trip up the coast from Brisbane to Cairns. We bought a van for $2,000, which we fondly nicknamed the Bucket. It was a 1970-something V-dub, and was definitely past its prime. And so we all piled into this thing, and we caravanned up the coast with one other group, and stopped at all these beautiful beaches along the way. It was a beautiful trip. There was long stretches of open highway where there was nobody else around, exclusive beaches, and things were wonderful. So we made it all the way up the coast, and we were ready to come back down. And we started back down, and we're going through these big stretches of open highway where there was nobody around. And the Bucket, had been operating fairly well. It was a little bit of a tinkerer. We had to actually had learned how to drive stick on this thing, and you had to shift like that.
Like a bad dance move.
Yeah, that's how I learned how to shift. But it was around just 100 or 200 miles on our way back that we all of a sudden had a blowout in the middle of this highway. And the car is careening, and the girls are screaming, and we are managed to stop the vehicle. And where do we find ourselves but in the middle of nowhere? sparing for a few kangaroos jumping over the road.
Okay, now let's pause there and give me a little bit of visual of this. How many people are in the van?
So we've got, I think there's 6 of us total, two guys and 4 girls. And there was another car that had kind of gone down the road, seen us, got into our issue, but didn't know what to do. So we stopped, we got out, everyone was frazzled. It was 100 degrees outside and we had very little water. We had a pop tire and we couldn't find another tire on the van. And
so before you leave, there's no checking to see if there's a tire.
not the most shining moments of my early traveling.
This was years ago, though, have you? He's become much smarter since then.
That's right. Yes, college is a time to get these kind of snafus out of the way if you can. Yeah. So we went and we looked around the vehicle, and lo and behold, we did find a tire. It was underneath the vehicle, but because it was a 1970-something van, it had been rusted shut. There was no getting that tire out. So we realized after yanking and tugging that something else was going to have to happen. We didn't see anybody around except for a farm that was probably about, 300, 400 yards away. Okay. And because we were manly men, we volunteered our lovely women to go to the farm to ask.
That sounds safe.
Yeah,
that's good.
At the time I don't remember why. We thought that they would be less offensive to whoever might find them than 2 random dudes walking up on the property.
Good.
So we kept, yanking on the tire and trying to get that off while they walked by themselves to the farm. When they came back with a tire and our mouths dropped open, we asked them how they got it. And they had taken the tire, the flat with them, so they knew what the size was.
Smart.
Found out that this was a nice little old lady who offered them some water from the nearby water catching device.
So they found the sweetest woman in the world.
Yes, apparently. Who also had a tire collection. Which goes to show you that, just because you think a farmer in the middle of nowhere, you don't.
I've said that all the time.
I know, me too.
Yeah.
So they were able to actually procure a tire from this person.
So she gave it to him?
No. She charged us a pretty penny.
Maybe she's not such a nice lady.
No, she wasn't that nice lady, but she did have exactly what we needed when we needed it in that snafu and that derailing. She sold us the tire for a lot of money, and we were able to get the tire back on the vehicle and continued on our way. About another 500 miles down the road on a highway, another tire on the van blew out.
That's ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. And I actually was asleep and I woke up to screaming and guardrail screeching, which is one of the worst things to wake up to, I'm pretty sure.
That's what I've heard.
This time we were closer to people and civilization. We're able to get a service to come help us. And then we were on our way. So the moral of this story, if there is any, is that you are going to have something go wrong at some point, and sometimes it's really bad, and sometimes not so bad. But you got to keep your cool. You got to be resourceful. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And certainly use everyone in your group. Don't ever discount somebody because you think that they're not capable of providing some value in that.
Awesome. That's a great story, Coop. Thanks.
Thanks, man.
Mm-hmm. This is one of my favorite questions. If you go anywhere in the world to somewhere you've already been, where would that be?
Wow. If I could go anywhere right now, the first place that pops into my head is South Africa. I've been to 35 different countries and I've traveled extensively in most of them, but there is something fundamentally different about Africa. Specifically, the area that I am thinking of is the Zulu lands in kind of the northern part of South Africa. There's just amazing wildlife. There is amazing culture. You have a crazy juxtaposition of wealth next to poverty and a coexisting of the two. It's a very interesting place to go, and I love nature.
Do you have any stories about this, or any, like, can you bring this home? Give me some
Totally.
examples.
Absolutely. For me, me and a close friend of mine decided that we would be brave and rented a car in Durban, flew in, wanted to go travel around South Africa, and we drove up north and decided we were going to go see some safaris, which were fantastic and beautiful. But the coolest and maybe the craziest thing that we did was we wanted to go off the beaten track. And I don't recommend this to everybody or practically anybody unless you
This is how you learn, right?
Yeah, right. You're a seasoned traveler and you feel like you've got enough street smarts to do something like this. But we hired a ranger who's someone basically who has some ability to enforce law, but mostly within the natural world. Like they can they can protect you a little bit, but they know the areas that you're going in. You can see animals and view animals and go places with them. So we hired someone to take us to a village called Nampondo. That was not a normal village for tourists or travelers to go to. And we went in and were taken to a very, very small, intimate setting of a marketplace. And it was a very impoverished place, but I had decided before I went to Africa that I would bring a bag of toys with me that I would give out. When you go somewhere, I find it's good to bring parts of your culture that you can leave and the places that you go to. I think it's important sometimes to share what's important to you to other people. It allows them to open up too. So we got to this place, and I had a bag of toys, and we were immediately kind of seen as, you know, obviously we stood out. We were the only outsiders there, and it wasn't a very friendly environment at first. You know, we weren't dressed the same. We looked tourists. We're both young males, and I brought out the bag of toys, and immediately the environment changed. And once I offered them to whoever the leader was of basically the Zulu tribe that we were at, they took the toys and started giving them to the children. And as the children, you know, rummaged through and were grabbing the toys or running different directions, the people in the actual marketplace came up to us, started shaking our hands, and brought us in to then eat with them and share meals with us. And, you know, it was just an experience that I will never, ever forget. And, you know, from just, you know, a core connection level that you can connect with anybody if you're able to share and be open-minded with that other culture or that other individual.
Yeah, it sounds like you really created that situation. It sounds like you were very much responsible for breaking down those walls that otherwise existed.
Absolutely. And it doesn't always work, right? Sometimes that could be seen as really just importing again, you know, your culture.
Sure, that's a fine line, yeah.
And so you do have to measure that out and see, and also be willing to fall on the sword and apologize and know when you've done something wrong. But I do think it's important to go out there and let people know, be stewards of, you know, the traveler, and let people know that we want to be there to learn, we want to be there to share. I love Africa for that. I love that it's one of those places that is very different from anything that, you know, most Americans would experience. But it also, at its core level, has some of the deeper connections of humanity that really keep us all safe when we travel.
You talk about finding that balance with situations like this. Can you talk more about that? I mean, how do you weigh the pros and the cons? How do you feel out of situation?
I think that comes with experience. I think it is hard, and trial and error is something that you just have to be able to roll with, because there are countless times when I was traveling in the beginning where, you know, you have a faux pas, where you commit a cultural error, and you have to be able to kind of forgive yourself or roll with it. I think the balance is when you start to realize that people want to, you know, forgive you. They want to find a connection with you. And so whenever you're going into a situation, you look for the cues. You look what they're doing, because imitation, they say, is the greatest compliment. And so, you know, if you see how people are, you know, eating a meal, or you see how they greet each other, really try to imitate that. And I think that's one of the greatest signs of respect that you can show to someone or to some place that you're going. And that creates balance, because within yourself, you will start to find that you become enculturated by the places that you're visiting, and not just going in there, as the Westerner, trying to shake everyone's hands and maybe talking in
wearing your suit,
and
walking a specific way.
Yeah, and trying to import what's most important to you, to those people. But balance is, again, it's an experience-driven process. You don't just go in and feel all of a sudden that everything is right in the situation.
Let's talk about the people, because this is one of my favorite parts of traveling. Who's the most interesting person that you've ever met while traveling?
Well, since we were talking about Africa, I think someone who immediately pops in my head was the ranger that I had met when we were traveling there.
So tell me, what's this guy look like? Give me a mental image.
So, if you think like a kind of like a Steve Irwin-y, Crocodile Dundee,
Okay.
It's like kind of a mesh between the two. You've got someone who's got, kind of fatigue-looking wear, maybe like that Australian-style hat, South African accent. John was the guy's name, and he was a young guy, probably in his 30s. Rough, unshaven look.
Facial hair is important.
You got to have the facial hair.
Yeah, if you're out in nature, it's a given.
Oh,
It's a
totally.
must.
And it's scary out there, so you want to make sure that your chin's protected.
Gotta keep that stuff warm.
Yeah. And he was a seasoned ranger, and he had done lots of schooling and gotten his education in basically how to become a naturalist and how to kill somebody. he was an enforcer of nature,
Okay.
and he was very interesting because he knew everything that you could possibly know about the plants and the animals and the behavior of the animals that we were seeing. We'd be driving along and he'd be like, oh, that doe, she's in heat over there. You can see by the tails flipped up, and there's a pile of dung right behind her there. Yeah. And if you look past it, there's a tiger or a lion just stalking her. You might see the little tips right there in the grass. Really just with like catching everything. And he didn't actually talk exactly like that. But
I figured not, because nobody talks like that.
no, but South Africa, yeah, and that's really culturally sensitive. So, but South Africa is pretty hard
That was actually
language to
that
imitate.
was really good.
Yeah.
That was a lot better than I could
Well,
do.
Australian's about the only thing I can really imitate semi-well.
I think we just heard that.
Okay. So
Don't make fun of the guest. Don't make fun of the guest. Got it. Okay. Interviewing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hard.
John, so John was so interesting because he knew everything about these animals and the plants and their way of life and the behavior of them, but he also was willing to die for them. He was so passionate about them that he believed that his job, and it was his job, was to protect them. And so there's a lot, you hear about it in the news, but it's a much bigger issue than the news gives it credit for. But poaching is huge in Africa, and there's a lot of illegal poaching. And these guys put their lives on the line every day to defend themselves, defend the animals from people who are just coming in with literally helicopters, grenade launchers, and way more military stuff than should be available to them. Because the reason that those poachers have those things is because the market is so huge.
It's a lot of money.
That they're going in there and they can really take what they want. So this guy was interesting to me because he was really smart, passionate, and fierce. And I think that was something that I admired, and maybe something that I won't ever really have within me, in terms of a willing to die for an animal kind of mentality.
Yeah, it's a special thing.
But I think it's important to meet people who are so different from you, but have qualities that you fully admire and want to take something from. So from being around him, I wanted to know more about animal behavior. And so as a result, I asked this guy, and this is something great when you're traveling, you meet someone who's interesting, what do you read? Give me some tips or some of your favorite, literature. And so I took a bunch of books back with me, and it was a lot about animal behavior and a lot about just learning what it's like being a ranger. And I found that made it all that much more clear.
Yeah.
The picture.
Yeah, it's one of the nice things about travel is that you really can only start to understand those things once you've experienced it firsthand.
Totally.
And then you can take little pieces of it back home, like you're saying, to expand on that knowledge, but you first have to dip your toes and experience it like that.
Totally. It's not easy to get travel if you don't really put yourself in those situations. Reading is not enough. You have to be there.
Yeah, it's just a supplement, it seems
Totally.
like.
Totally.
Yeah. So, speaking of the same thing, where do you consider home now?
So I've always felt like Seattle was my home. I love Seattle for its evergreen colors, the mountains, the water. We have the Puget Sound. I grew up here, so I have a wonderful network here, friends and family, and I've always felt like it's home. But I also went to college in Denver, and I did 7 years there. Total.
Took you 7 years to get through college?
Well, no, that last year I really just wanted to drag my heels.
Yeah, you did a victory lap.
I think it's important to drag your heels out of college. Not everybody agrees with that, but so I feel like Colorado also to me feels like home. And my kind of view is that once you are in a city and you feel like you know that city, you know the little tricks to get around traffic or the best places to eat or that view that not many people know about. Once you get comfortable and you can call a city home that way, then you can have multiple homes. So I don't think you have to have just one home. Yeah. And that also helps me when I travel because the more familiar I get with a place, the more kind of confident I can become when I go back there.
Makes sense. So how many homes do you think you have at this point?
It's a good question. I really think, 2 would be my primary residences, and then I probably have, some flats in other countries from a traveler's perspective, but don't own any property yet.
Yeah.
Nope.
He's actually being modest. He has hubs, I'd say, all over the world. 6 or 7 that I know of, although that when we travel together, he'll just randomly know a city like the back of his hand that I had never been to before. So
thank you.
Keep learning stuff about you.
Thank you.
Now, whenever we're leaving to go on a trip, people generally think of a few things that are very important. So they think of credit cards, they think of passports, they think of, say, paperwork if you have visas or whatnot. What are some of the things that are non-essential that go through your head as you're packing for a trip or right before you leave?
Well, you mentioned passport and credit cards.
Right.
You need those. But hands down, my camera. My camera and my camera tools. I have left my home and gone to some amazing place without my XLR camera and been devastated that I couldn't capture some of those moments with me. So I think, always have a way to capture what you're seeing. It's not going to be as good as real life, but it will transport you back there and you'll be thankful for it,
Yeah, and you can share it with others.
Absolutely. Other non-essentials, if I am checking my bag, I'll always take a pocket knife. I don't know why, but I always find a use for a pocket knife when I'm traveling.
So this must be not carry-on, right?
Right, not carry on.
Yeah.
If you are checking your bags, and that for me is just kind of like a survival thing.
Sure.
You never know when you might need to cut something, or save your own life.
Or someone.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it happens.
And other than that, I think it's non-essential. I always try and bring a book with me, and nowadays you can just read online and do things like that. But for me, when I have downtime, when I'm traveling, I like to know that I've put something in my bag that is kind of one more thing that I should get to, and leave behind somewhere for someone else to read. Those are kind of the extraordinary things that I bring.
Interesting. Well, Coop, this has been tremendously valuable to me. I'm sure it's been tremendously valuable to the viewers as well. Thank you so much for your time. Just as a reminder, the reason that I picked Coop to do this is because of his travel lifestyle and because of the business he runs. It's His and Hers Romantic Vacations. I've personally used this. I've paid my own money for it. It's a really, really fantastic service. He plans all of those little details that the kind of stuff that guys like me miss, so that both people on these getaways can have a good time. So, Coop, if I wanted to get one of these romantic locations and I wanted you to set this up for me and my girlfriend or my boyfriend, how would I do this?
So just come to our website, www.hisandhersvacations.com, or you can email me directly at cooper@hisandhersvacations.com.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time, Cooper. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.